Okay, so you know how we asked for some interesting investment ideas?
Hmm.
Well, you guys definitely delivered.
Yeah.
This WAEBGenic ennew.pdf document.
Wow.
It's something else.
Yeah. It takes you down a very different path.
It really does.
Talking about the ultimate investment.
This blueprint of eternity thing. Have you heard about this before?
I have actually. I've come across it in some of the more, shall we say, unconventional investment circles.
Really?
Okay.
Okay, so let's break this down for everyone listening, because I'm guessing most people, when they think about investments, they're thinking, real estate stocks, bonds, maybe even crypto these days.
Right, exactly. The tangible, the things you can see and touch and track on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
This is definitely not that.
No, this blueprint of eternity idea, it's asking us to think about returns in a whole different way. Like, what if there was an investment that could give you infinite returns?
And regular dividends even.
Yeah. So it's a really mind-bending concept when you first encounter it.
It is. It challenges you to rethink what you actually value.
So let's try to unpack this a little bit. What is this blueprint of eternity all about?
Well, at its core, it's about investing in your eternal self.
Okay.
Through a connection with the architect of human DNA.
Architect of human DNA. So are we talking about like a higher power here?
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
A force or being that's responsible for our very existence.
Okay. Interesting.
And the source contrasts this with what it calls the current trend, extension of the finite.
Okay.
So all these efforts to prolong life,
Like Silicon Valley pouring billions into longevity research.
Exactly. And you have biohackers like Brian Johnson trying to optimize every aspect of their biology.
Yeah.
And even the whole transhumanist movement with dreams of uploading our consciousness into digital realms.
Right.
It's all focused on extending our finite existence.
So pushing the limits, but still within the confines of time as we know it.
Exactly.
And what does the source say about that?
Well, it acknowledges the human desire behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also points out that these approaches are still time-limited.
Mm-hmm.
They're often financially and ethically demanding.
Yeah.
And the returns are ultimately finite.
Because even if you live to be 200 years old, you're still going to die eventually.
Okay.
So this blueprint of eternity is proposing something radically different.
Right. It's not about adding years to your life, but tapping into a life without time limits.
Life unrestricted by time and space and matter?
Yeah.
So are we talking about an afterlife here?
It seems that way,
Yeah.
but it's not presented in the traditional religious sense.
Okay.
It's more about aligning yourself with this eternal blueprint and reaping the rewards of a reality that transcends our current understanding.
The source uses this term smart spiritual transhumanism. What do they mean by that?
I think they're trying to bridge the gap between scientific and spiritual aspirations.
Okay.
Because on one hand, you have this drive in science to overcome death, to achieve immortality.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have religious traditions that promise eternal life.
So they're both aiming for the same thing.
In a way, yes. It's just that the source suggests that the technology of immortality is already available.
Not in a lab somewhere.
No. It's found in the time and attention we invest in a relationship with the Creator, with God.
Wow. It's a very different approach to solving that age-old problem of death.
It is. And to illustrate this point, the source brings up this ancient parable,
Oh, yeah.
the parable of the rich fool from the Gospel of Luke.
Okay, so remind us what that story is about.
It's about this wealthy farmer who has a bumper crop,
Okay.
like a huge harvest.
So he's happy, right?
Well, he is at first,
Yeah.
but then he starts worrying about where to store all this grain.
Okay.
So he decides to tear down his barns and build bigger ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah, from a purely practical standpoint.
Okay.
But then he makes this fatal mistake.
What's that?
He starts talking about how he can now relax and take it easy and enjoy his wealth for years to come.
Oh, so he's assuming he's got all the time in the world.
Exactly. And that's when the divine response comes in.
What does it say?
Fool. This night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided?
Wow. So the story is saying that this guy was so focused on his material wealth that he completely neglected his spiritual well-being.
And ultimately he paid the price.
It's a pretty powerful message.
It is. And it's incredibly relevant to our conversation about the blueprint of eternity.
Because we can get so caught up in building our financial portfolios that we forget about the bigger picture.
Exactly. We might be accumulating wealth and possessions, but are we investing in the things that truly matter in the long run?
Yeah. So the source is arguing that this blueprint of eternity, it's not just some abstract spiritual concept. It actually has practical implications for how we live our lives right now.
Right. It changes your priorities. It makes you think about what you're truly investing in.
So is it saying that we should all quit our jobs and go live in a monastery?
No, not necessarily. It's more about a shift in perspective,
Okay.
a reevaluation of what constitutes a worthwhile investment.
So how does this blueprint actually work in practice?
Well, the source delves into some psychological insights to explain why we tend to make certain choices.
Okay.
For example, they talk about temporal discounting,
Temporal discounting.
which is basically our tendency to prioritize immediate rewards over future gains.
So like that marshmallow experiment where kids choose to eat one marshmallow now rather than wait and get 2 marshmallows later.
Exactly. And we do this all the time as adults, too. We overspend on things we don't need.
Right.
We procrastinate on important tasks.
Mm-hmm.
We make choices that feel good in the moment, but have negative consequences down the road.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are, to some extent. But the source suggests that the blueprint of eternity can provide a mental framework to overcome this.
How so?
By shifting our focus to an eternal perspective, it can help us see beyond the immediate allure of instant gratification and invest in things that have truly enduring value.
So instead of always thinking about what I want right now, I should consider the long-term consequences of my actions.
Exactly. And those consequences might extend beyond this lifetime according to the blueprint of eternity.
Right. So it's not just about delayed gratification. It's about considering the implications for your eternal self.
Precisely.
Okay, so that's temporal discounting. What other psychological insights does the source offer?
They also talk about the illusion of immortality.
What's that?
It's this idea that intellectually we know we're going to die,
Yeah.
but emotionally it often feels like we have an unlimited amount of time.
Oh, I totally get that. It's like death is this abstract thing that happens to other people, but not to me.
Right. And this illusion can lead us to procrastinate on those investments in eternity,
Like what?
like nurturing meaningful relationships, focusing on personal and spiritual growth, living ethically.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen. You think you have all the time in the world to get around to those things.
But the blueprint of eternity offers a different perspective.
By reminding us that our time is actually limited.
Exactly. And by making us more aware of the profound significance of those seemingly less tangible investments.
So it's about urgency.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But it's not about fear-mongering or creating anxiety.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the preciousness of the time we have and using it wisely.
So this blueprint of eternity, it's like a wake-up call to start living more intentionally.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've talked about temporal discounting and the illusion of immortality. What else does the source mention?
They also bring up the endowment effect,
Endowment effect.
which is the tendency to overvalue things we already possess.
Oh, yeah. Like I have this old T-shirt from college that I never wear, but I can't bring myself to get rid of it.
Exactly. And we do this with all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Our houses, our cars, our collections.
So the blueprint of eternity is saying that we should be less attached to material possessions.
I think the message is more nuanced than that.
Okay.
It's not about getting rid of everything you own.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from investments that transcend the material realm.
So instead of focusing on accumulating more stuff, I should be investing in experiences, relationships, my spiritual growth.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's about shifting your focus from what you have to who you are and what you contribute to the world.
So what would a diversified portfolio look like under this blueprint of eternity?
Well, the source outlines 4 key components.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, there's relationship capital.
Relationship capital, so investing in deeper, more meaningful connections with the people in my life.
Exactly. Building strong bonds of love and friendship.
Mm-hmm.
That's seen as a crucial investment in your eternal self.
Okay, what else?
Then there's ethical capital,
Ethical capital,
which is about building a strong and virtuous moral character.
so making choices that align with your values and principles.
Right. Acting with integrity, honesty, and compassion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then we have spiritual capital,
Spiritual capital.
which is about nurturing your connection with God and embracing eternal values.
So exploring your spirituality and connecting with something greater than yourself.
Exactly. And finally, there's knowledge capital.
Knowledge capital. Okay, so is this just about going to school and getting a degree?
It's more than that. It's about pursuing wisdom and understanding. It's about seeking truth and applying it to your life.
So it's not just information, it's about how you use that information to grow as a person.
Precisely.
This is a pretty radical departure from the way most people think about investments.
It is, but the source argues that it's the only way to achieve true and lasting wealth.
Wealth that extends beyond this lifetime.
Exactly. And it's interesting how the source compares this to Warren Buffett's famous forever holding period.
Oh, yeah. He's known for taking a very long-term view on investments.
But even Buffett's forever is limited to the duration of his earthly existence.
Right.
The blueprint of eternity takes things a step further. It's about investing in things that will retain their value even after you're gone.
And the source introduces this concept of different kinds of ROIs, returns on investment.
Right. So instead of just focusing on financial gains, we should also consider our relational ROI.
So the depth and quality of our relationships.
Exactly. And our ethical ROI, the positive impact of our moral choices, our spiritual ROI, the growth in our connection with God.
And even our existential ROI.
How our investments contribute to a sense of meaning and purpose.
So this isn't just about what happens after we die. It's about how these eternal investments enrich our present lives.
Precisely. It's a much more holistic and comprehensive view of what truly constitutes a worthwhile investment.
So it's like these eternal investments, they pay dividends in this life as well.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's not about sacrificing present happiness for some future reward. It's about recognizing that the things that truly matter for eternity also bring joy and fulfillment in the present moment.
The source includes some short testimonies as well, right?
Yes. They call it social proof.
Social proof.
So they have these little snippets from people like Merrick Kay, who's a tech entrepreneur and investor.
Okay.
And he talks about how he found lasting joy and fulfillment through his faith in Christ.
Interesting.
And then there's Jana H. She's a neuroscientist.
Okay.
And she was surprised by the evidence she found supporting the resurrection of Christ.
Really?
Yeah. And then there's Tamashi B. He's a financial analyst.
Okay.
And he says that the best ROI he's ever seen is in his relationship with God.
So they're showing that this blueprint of eternity, it's not just some theoretical concept. It's something that real people are applying to their lives.
Exactly. And they're seeing tangible results.
Then the source goes on to present this conceptual investment return calculator. What is that all about?
It's basically a way to compare the returns of traditional investments with those of the blueprint of eternity.
Okay.
So on one side, you have things like real estate stocks and funds, education, and personal development.
Okay.
And they all have their own projected annual returns and durations.
Right.
But on the other side, you have the blueprint of eternity.
And what are the returns on that?
Infinite.
Wow.
And the duration.
Not eternal.
Exactly. So it's a very stark contrast.
It really drives home the point that this is a whole different ballgame.
Right. It's about investing in something that transcends the limitations of our current understanding of time and value.
But I imagine this brings up a lot of questions for people, like how do you even measure the return on an investment in eternity?
Yeah, that's a valid question. And the source addresses it head on.
Okay.
They acknowledge that traditional financial metrics don't really apply here,
Right.
but they suggest evaluating the qualitative outcomes.
Qualitative outcomes.
So things like your overall quality of life, your inner peace, your sense of purpose and meaning,
Okay.
and your experience of joy.
So these are more subjective measures.
They are, but they're presented as very real and profoundly transformative results.
So it's not about seeing your investment grow in a bank account?
No.
Yeah.
It's about experiencing a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose in your life.
Okay, that makes sense. What other questions does the source address?
They also talk about the concern that focusing on eternity is just a way to escape from the realities of our current life.
Yeah, I could see how some people might think that.
But the source argues the opposite.
Really?
They say that having an eternal perspective actually makes our earthly existence more meaningful.
Okay.
It encourages us to invest more intentionally in our relationships, our personal development, and our ethical conduct.
Because we know that these things have long-term implications.
Exactly. And for those who might be seeking some scientific validation, the source even mentions how some contemporary physicists, including Nobel laureates, are challenging the purely materialistic view of reality.
Oh, interesting.
They're finding clues in quantum physics, information theory, and neuroscience that suggest there might be more to the universe than meets the eye.
So there might be scientific evidence to support the idea of an eternal realm.
That's what the source is suggesting. And they also offer a specific starting point for anyone who wants to explore this blueprint of eternity further.
What's that?
research. They recommend reading the New Testament, learning about the life and teachings of Jesus, and connecting with a community of believers.
So it's about taking that first step towards exploring this new way of thinking about life and investment.
Exactly. And that's really what this whole blueprint of eternity is about. It's an invitation to consider a different perspective, a different set of priorities, and a different way of measuring success.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the blueprint of eternity, I think it's worth circling back to those fundamental questions the source raises. What are you truly investing your life in? What kind of return are you anticipating? And over what time horizon?
And are you, in the words of the parable, rich toward God?
It's a really challenging thought, isn't it? When you reach the end of your life, will you look back with a sense of fulfillment, or will there be a part of you that feels like you missed out on something truly important?
The blueprint of eternity challenges us to think long-term, to think beyond our immediate gratification, and to invest in things that will have lasting value.
And it encourages us to consider this concept of spiritual investing.
To look beyond the constraints of our current lifespan and contemplate what truly holds eternal significance.
The source even mentions an ebook titled 5 Principles of Investments in Eternity for those who want to delve deeper into this topic.
And they leave us with this powerful quote from the Gospel of Matthew. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
It's a powerful reminder that true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in the richness of our relationships, our character, our spirituality, and our contributions to the world.
It's about investing in things that will last for eternity.
So as you go about your day-to-day, I encourage you to think about this blueprint of eternity. What would it mean for you to invest in something with potentially infinite returns? How would it change the way you live your life starting right now? It's a question worth pondering.
It certainly is.
That's all for this deep dive, folks. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.